good to see all of you. We'll leave time at the end for questions and comments and just interacting with all of you guys. But I think I'll just flash this thing on the screen as a little starting point to make it easier to edit. But let's get started. So really quickly here, a company called CrowdStrike, who hosts a cloud-based platform for cybersecurity called Falcon, had a disastrous morning. And we'll get back to that. But what happened pretty much is that this is a platform that provides cybersecurity for enterprises, for large companies like airlines, right? Payment gateways, banks, police departments, people who need that extra security. And this particular issue, first and foremost, is not a cyber attack. This was is a lot more innocuous than that, and kind of a self blunder. They made a mistake that caused one of their critical updates to down or cause crashing issues to Windows 10 and 11, I believe, platforms. So really quickly, if we look at their own summary, it tells us like which platforms were and weren't involved here. So first of all, this doesn't impact like Linux or Mac. So we're an entirely Mac operation here. This hasn't impacted us at all. And hosts running Windows 7, 2008 are not impacted. So this appears to have been an issue with Windows 10 and 11. Why does this matter? Well, because I had friends text me this morning that they weren't able to buy coffee. They were like Starbucks and local restaurants and stuff were completely at a standstill because their payment gateways weren't working. I had a friend text me that he is stuck at an airport and unable to catch his flight. So I pulled up some flight information for San Diego Airport where we are, and there are major, major delays. There have been entire flights being canceled, some entire fleets being grounded, and this impacts everybody because a lot of these systems, like if you ever see our thumbnail picture was, a lady looking at a flight board, but those systems that show you which gate and who's boarding next and the flight numbers, all that stuff is apparently running on Windows, and it runs behind this safety infrastructure. And so a lot of people are first pointing the finger at Microsoft because nobody wants to see the blue. Let's see if I have a picture of that. Like nobody wants to see a picture of the blue screen of death, as it's so famously been called. But at the same time, this actually isn't a Microsoft issue. This was from CrowdStrike, this enterprise platform. So if you have a personal Windows machine and you don't have any enterprise security, cybersecurity kinds of add-ons or platforms, you're probably not affected by this, but big, large companies are. So this is not a cyber attack. And let's actually dig into their press release and figure out exactly what happened, which is something as a software engineer, I'm going to give you my take on here later on, but it's interesting. So apparently there was a release that went out early here Friday morning, and it apparently is impacted by the single.sys file, this one right here. And what they're saying is that all new updates, they've already identified the issue and fixed it. But if you know anything about software, that doesn't mean mission accomplished because some of these machines aren't turning on. So this is like low level kind of stuff. This is like, after the BIOS, before Windows boots, that's where this lives. Because if there's any kind of cybersecurity threat, that software has to be below the operating system because otherwise it can't override the operating system, right? So like if there was a cybersecurity threat, this code is supposed to be able to shut things down, take things offline, remote wipe, things like that, right? High level security stuff. So as a result, let's say now they've addressed the issue. They know what it was. It was a bad update. Somebody made a mistake and they've addressed it. But the problem is it's still going to be a problem. Imagine, for example, in the video, in the live stream right now, write to me, how many of you guys know how to boot into safe mode? What's that?
I think we have low frame rates. Can you tell how's our connection?
Yeah. It's not receiving enough data, it says. Is it connected to the Ethernet? Hardwired in?
Yep, nothing's changed.
Okay. Yeah, Juan's going to troubleshoot that, but in the meantime, I'll try not to move too much. And I'm wondering if the audio is cutting out as well, stuttering and buffering. Actually, did he get hit too? It could be systems that are impacted by this as well on the YouTube side, because let's do a little speed test here. Do a little speed test on your computer, see if it's coming up okay. Let's see.
You know Dorn is not on the 10 gig card?
I do know that. Yeah, I don't think it had one, but it's hardwired in, right?
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, our internet is very fast. It might be a it might be an issue with YouTube, but we'll play along and we'll see what happens here. We'll do our best, and the problem that we're talking about is causing the buffering. It could be because I've never gotten this message on the YouTube dashboard before, and I just checked our internal systems and everything seems to be a
Yeah.
go.
Our setup hasn't changed.
The headset hasn't changed, yeah. Okay, so this security issue has been addressed, but the problem is, let me know in the comments if you guys can even hear me, if I'm even talking to anybody. Let me know in the comments if you guys know how to boot into safe mode and revert to a previous version of Windows. How many people know how to do that? Like I always think to myself, imagine talking my mom and dad through something, which is sometimes very painful, right? But my parents would not be able to figure this out. And so if you have like a bad corrupted file that's preventing Windows from booting, you're going to be stuck in the state where you might not be able to get a new critical update patch, right? I'm not 100% sure that's what's happening here, but it might be. So in that case, what you would have to do is go into safe mode, and they actually provide guidance on this. Let's see here. They actually do provide guidance on this. Let's see. They tell you what you can do if you have issues with this for a workaround is you can boot Windows into safe mode, a recovery environment, which is actually kind of a separate install on your hard drive that they put just for these kinds of purposes. And what they're telling you to do is to go into this Win directory, System32 drivers, CrowdStrike directory, locate that file and delete it, and then boot the host normally. And if you think that an average airline operator at United Airlines at the gate of your flight is going to know how to do that properly, maybe, maybe. But odds are, if they did, they'll be a hero. But it's not that easy. And this gets into a lot of software engineering challenges. I'm curious if there's any DevOps people in the live stream. I was a software engineer, but I worked closely with DevOps, especially during critical releases and things that we knew could potentially impose problems. And Jim says, I see and hear you watching on a Linux machine, though. Interesting. Okay. So, yeah, this is a pretty major problem. And I think the reason why I'm making this live stream is it shows you how fragile some of the things are. We live in a world where we have major monopolies, and I used to be so proud of like my Silicon Valley tech background, but increasingly I do feel like they're kind of in some ways becoming the villains in some of this stuff. But there's such monopolistic power. How many Windows computers are there? And if one issue like this arises, we're talking about shutting down the entire planet. And in the future, it could be worse. It could be something else. This could have been a cybersecurity attack, and then it could have been something different, right? But our systems are so interdependent that this one innocuous little file that was problematic and causing a crash has halted air travel, right? It's keeping merchants from performing commerce, from taking payments on their electronic payment gateways. And get this one is pretty wild. I was just reading, it's amazing. So there is a phone outage, this which includes 911, and this was a tweet, a Facebook post from Ohio. And what they're saying is that if you have any issues or if you're in any kind of danger, that they might not be able to take your calls. I'm not sure if that particular issue has been resolved, but that probably comes from the fact that their systems run on voice over IP software, potentially being run on one of these platforms. And this takes me back to something that my dad always tells me. I used to always give my dad a hard time because to this day he has a phone connection running to his house. When I bought my house in 2009, this was already in the age where phone lines are being phased out. I've never had a phone line in my life. My dad pays a ton of money. I think it's like $26 a month for a phone line running to his house. And I've always told him, what are you doing? Like, you could just get voice over IP. You can do all these things. And he always told me, I will always have this phone line because I want it for my security system. You know, somebody, the internet goes down or they do something, they can still get the security system still runs on that phone line, and that they can make a phone call even if the power goes out. It's just another system, right? If we put all of our eggs in one basket, when that basket has a hole in it, all your eggs fall out. And this is kind of what's happening. I do think every opportunity is a learning opportunity. We can figure out what goes wrong and figure it out from there and add better resiliency to our systems. I remember we did a video where the sirens to alarm people in Hawaii during the Maui fires last year, they didn't work and there was an issue, and there was actually a reason why they were able to pinpoint the problem and kind of move forward. And yeah, so we do live in a very connected world, and that means that something like this could potentially knock out pretty important stuff. Now, the question that I always have, and some of this stuff is kind of top secret and we don't really know, is what about our really critical infrastructure? What is that running on? And this also gets into something that I know a lot of business owners who refuse to upgrade Windows, refuse to because they just like how whatever they have now works, and they're not about trying to find new things and update their software and stuff. So for the same reasons, like there are airplanes in the sky right now running on like 1970s computer technology, right? And they were never upgraded. They just keep updating the software on, you know, floppy disks or whatever it might be. And I think some of the nuclear bunkers and silos that we have in the U.S. run on like 50-year-old computing platforms where there's no new products, there's no new circuitry being made. They're hard to maintain and all this kind of stuff. Um, George Hill says CrowdStrike is going to have to pay so much for this mistake. Yeah, I mean, this gets into kind of a regulatory or a legal grounds outside of my realm of engineering. But I am curious, what do you guys think? How liable should they be held? Because I mean, it was a mistake that they made that's causing billions of dollars of losses, probably, right? Their stock price is taking a hit today, as you can imagine. But how liable should these companies be? Should we kind of forgive and try to impose things to make them better? I don't know, right? That's a tricky one. But I'll share an experience that I've had. We had this joke that we would never push major changes on a Friday, not unless you didn't want to potentially have a weekend, right? Because if you make a big change on a Friday, then over the weekend, who's going to watch it, make sure everything went out well. And software engineers have learned how to do this better and better. And there's different layers to it. One of the things that we do, and you've probably seen this, is one of the big things that we'll do now is a staggered release. So, you know, 1% of users get the update to version 5 today, and then they'll look at the crash logs, make sure that the crash rates are not changing, there's no big issues. Then they'll roll to 5%, then to 10%, then to 50 and 100, right? And by doing that, they can catch an issue like this early. But I think at this low level kind of state, this might have just been a push that happened everywhere. And when you have a company that is this responsible for such a large part of people around the world, I think they might need to revisit their protocols and how they do this sort of thing. Now, these are really hip companies. They know what they're doing. They have the highest levels of, you know, test and release cycles, and they probably have a killer DevOps team. I know they do that. They found the issue already and they fixed it. It's just a question of when this is going to all kind of proliferate, right? So if you turn on your computer, like let's say for example, you run a restaurant and you don't really get to work and open until you're a sushi restaurant, you open at noon. Well, the good news for you is you would never have seen this problem, because when you turn on your computer, if there was some hot fix that they had to apply, it'll apply the new good version and you would have never seen the bad version. The problem is when you have a broken state, it's not always that easy to repair and fix it, which is one of the funny things about code, and why maybe we need like more of a middleman layer between, you know, even application or operating system and kernel, and something that can kind of never really change very much and, you know, revert things and things. And Microsoft also does not make a lot of things easy. Like there's no safe mode. I've never dealt with these kinds of things on Mac or Linux. Like for example, I've never had a computer that had to boot, but Windows is, you know, when you have to apply your code and make it run on every chip and every manufacturer's stuff, you have to open up much more, and Windows for that reason is very extensible and flexible. But for whatever reason, it also, these kinds of things do happen. There might be some things that Microsoft can do where if any sort of low level crash, you know, like this happens over and over, that they can auto, like they have a little have a little operating system running in the background on a single thread that can revert things and automatically fix it and tell you, hey, we reverted to a change from yesterday because your computer crashed X times in a row. There's things that can be done. And if we implement some of these settings, these problems might just be a small hiccup and not my flights are all canceled. I'm stuck here. I'm missing something, right? And all the cascading series of events that have happened here. We actually, yeah, border crossings, police stations. I mean, it just affects everyone. So one of the things that I remember as a software engineer is not to this level. I mean, I didn't write code that was going to impact the entire world. But I used to work at a company called Good Technology, which was eventually bought out by BlackBerry. And we made enterprise software, security software as well. But our big philosophy was it was application level. So like this code that runs on all these enterprise Windows machines, like it'll make for a kind of probably a crappy experience. I mean, it'll impact everything that you do, every mouse action, right? What we did at our company was you use your iPhone the way you like it. It's unprotected. But for all your work, you do it in an application and the application is managed for you. So one of the days I checked in some code thinking, I mean, it was a little bit risky because it was a pretty large code change, but I tested it. Everything was fine. And I went to bed. And around 2 or 3 in the morning, I started getting some phone calls. It was my boss. I had done something and checked something in on a Friday. It's always a Friday. Don't ever check in code on Friday is the advice I would give. But I had done something where I was adding a new feature to change some icon downloading performance. It was like this performance fix that I was doing. But what happened was all of my testing was sitting right by a router on Wi-Fi, and it was all working fine. But the minute people were out in the field, they were on low speed or very bad network conditions, and this one packet of data wasn't downloaded in time. There was this race condition that was causing crashes, and so I still remember to this day my boss is like, how this is affecting like 50% of users. Like, how did you not catch it? And my answer was like, well, at home on my fast Wi-Fi, I never noticed it. And so part of the reason why we were unable to do it correctly was because to correct it and fix it properly would require us to refactor our entire login flow, and that was like a month of work. But after this incident happened, they did prioritize it, and we set out to completely change the login flow to make every step very resilient, right? um, Software is really hard, and it's hard because you can't really predict how things will behave. I'll give you an example. We have some code to help us around here at 2 Vinci. And one day Juan texts me, he's like, hey, is this code broken or is something happened? I was like, I don't think so. And he's like, all right, try this file. And this code that I wrote in Python, I tried the file. I was like, oh crap, yeah, it's not working. And it turns out the reason why was because the file name had a dollar sign. Juan, you remember this?
Yep.
The file name had a dollar sign and then a number. And so in Python, that's one of the ways you can denote a variable. Is like $1 is like a variable that you can read out as a part of an input, and that's what was causing it. And so what I had to do once I figured out what was wrong with it is I had to change it to say, okay, if you find dollar sign, change it to USD. That's what I made it. So now it says USD1 instead of $1 before it called my function, and then everything else worked. Because there might have been a better way, but in that moment to get my guys unblocked, that's what I came up with. So yeah, it's
So I don't know if you can see
yeah.
OBS, Ricky. We have a 64% drop frames.
So it's still pretty bad. But I think the
Yeah.
audio is okay.
It cuts out every once in a while.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just taking a look at some of the comments now. A lot of drop frames. I don't know what we can do about that today, gentlemen, ladies. It might just be the nature of our live stream this afternoon, but I'm gonna look at some of the comments and kind of see. Uh, Net Saucy says Microsoft has been doing this. Let's see. Did I lose that comment? Microsoft has been doing this since the 80s, and they still can't get it right. I will remind everybody though as well that is that computer not doing so well?
23 upload.
It is a Windows computer. Okay, so here's a little fun fact for you guys. We have exactly one Windows computer in our business workflow, and it is the computer live streaming this event. And the reason why is because we have multiple camera angles and stuff, and we needed a Windows computer to take a PCI Express 4-port HDMI input card to be able to do this recording. And this computer drives me nuts every single day. So I guess at this point, I've kind of shared the story. It will pass. We're going to sort this all out for far too long. And in that era, I was so frustrated with Apple and Mac, and their laptops were that crappy. Like my buttons would stick and all kind. There's another problem too. It wasn't just the butterfly keyboard. Anyway, the Macs were so bad that I tried to get a Surface tablet. And I really forced myself to like it, but it just drove me nuts. It just felt like a very. It was like 20 different pieces all trying to work together compared to Mac, which is just seamless. I'm curious. You guys are probably split on this. I'm curious if you guys are Windows or Mac or Linux. I'm sure there's a good variety of people. But yeah, Windows is good. I mean, it runs the world. And what we don't notice is when everything goes right, when everything goes well, we don't really think much about it, right? We don't think, oh, what a great day. Everything worked. All we remember are the bad days. I was just telling one of my YouTube friends the same thing, which is, we had this video, and in my head, it was like, oh, the video is bad. It's like, well, there were 30 bad comments, but there were thousands of good comments and hundreds of thousands of views. But all I remembered was the 30 bad comments or whatever it was, right? So it's easy to remember the negatives and forget the positives. But yeah, days like today, unfortunately, will happen. It's humans. We will err. And it's what's funny is that they didn't catch this sooner, or just because it's enterprise software, you think, oh, and the nature of enterprise software and cybersecurity is you can't wait, right? If you're Facebook and you're rolling out a new feature where your friends have fireworks showing behind them, you can roll it out to 1% and wait a week and wait a month, right? But if you have a cybersecurity fix, can you wait? What if your clients are like, hey, why didn't I get the fix right away? Boeing got it, or Microsoft, Windows, Apple got the fix, and I didn't. And as a result, my data was hacked, right? So that's why these fixes, they have to probably just apply to everybody in the interest of security, right? And which is all the more reason why they have to get it right. And unfortunately, sometimes they don't. Um, our opinion, I can barely understand you. We ain't call pewter nerds. Okay. Very, very funny. Uh, but yeah, so computers, what a funny thing. MWD says, what city are you in? We're in San Diego. And yeah, I ran a speed test and my computer was fine. Yours was not so fine, huh? I don't know. It probably could be something else. We might have to rebooted it. But anyways, it's just a really quick live stream to kind of share some of this kind of insight with you guys. If you ask me, like, what could we do to fix this in the future or prevent it at least? Um, there's probably some recovery logic that Windows could do better about. Like if, and I remember there is some of this at play, but it depends on like how low level and how bad the issue is. If it prevents you from booting at all, that's when things get a little bit trickier. But there might be ways that Windows computers or just computers in general can recover more gracefully. Ways that security can be more tightly integrated as opposed to being this other outside thing. Um, yeah, it says fixed and Linux for the win. NWD, 100%. I love Linux. I'm a Mac guy, which is just basically a layer over Linux, but I do a lot of work in terminals and stuff, and it's definitely.
Yeah, so our drop frames are back to 0%, so
Yeah.
we're good. Our internet connection on OBS, it seems to be great.
Okay, we're back.
So,
Okay. So there you go. The power of the connectivity of the internet. Um, but yeah, and also I think this should probably give us pause in terms of just how monopolistic some of the things that we have in our life is. Like for example, I remember when Amazon, like AWS, had an outage, and people were saying like my Netflix isn't working, Hulu is not working, this isn't working. It's like all those things were running on AWS. We do unfortunately live in a very big tech world, and that does kind of bother me now, to be honest. I think we need to have less consolidation. I'm a huge I hate mergers and acquisitions. I think we need diversity. We need people to do things just a little bit different in different places. We can't just have Amazon host all the servers. We can't just have Microsoft run all the operating systems. And, it just, I think it's an unfortunate thing. But can you mute Arapima? I've had enough of him. Yeah. No, actually, it's okay. I'll give him. Yeah, you're free to drop off the chat, bro. You don't have to stay if you don't want to. All right. So thank you, John, by the way, for the $2 super chat. I really appreciate you. He says just buy an XPS Dell laptop powerhouse machine. Dell makes some really good business machines for sure. They do run Windows, unfortunately. Which is always the problem. Once you get kind of stuck in your operating system of choice, it just becomes that much more difficult to to switch over. But Dell definitely makes great machines. I used to like IBM as well before they sold it off to Lenovo. But yeah, ah, almost sneezed there. What Unix? Yeah, so there's just some questions about like how some of these systems work and stuff. But the software industry is wildly fascinating. If you I always wish that these tech companies would give people like a day in the life of tours. Like you should see what it's like to look at, like a big screen and check out logs and check out crash rates and see if there's an issue, and to then there are people who will triage very early. Like someone says, "Oh, the computers are crashing, figure it out." There will be like a DevOps engineer or some like quality assurance engineer, somebody who sits at the very top, somebody who knows maybe not like everything about something, but knows a little bit about everything, who could quickly look at the logs, like figure out the trace stack, like where the crashes are happening, and say, okay, this is happening in this part of the code, and then find the team responsible, get that message off to the managers there. They go and rally the troops, and then everyone's hunting down the code and trying to fix it. And the scary thing too, and I remember I had a boss who always told me, whenever you're fixing a bug, you need to be like doubly zen and take your time, because that's the easiest time to introduce new bugs or other things, because you're so focused on making this thing stop crashing that you might actually introduce other things, and it happens all the time. And in software, we have things like unit tests where you build this test suite. Like let's say you're building a calculator and you're doing all this code to make it faster. Well, you run this test suite and it does like 2 plus 2 is 4, and it tests all these different parameters. And if any of your tests fail, it's kind of an indication for you, like maybe you screwed something up, right? But you can't catch everything. It's impossible. And it is a stressful job at times. Being a software engineer like I was less stressful because I got a week to just go into my own world and designs and write code and build something. But then when it actually goes into production is a really stressful time. I remember in my last couple of months at Salesforce before I resigned to go full time on YouTube, we were working on this major refactoring, like where we touched everything. We basically took the entire app and re-plumbed it, right? Imagine like cutting all your plumbing and running new pipe. Every one of those joints is a potential spot where it could leak. You got to go check over everything. Something also we've done recently, literally with plumbing in our house. But and I remember being stressed out. That was the only time in my 5 years at Salesforce where I was stressed out, because I knew that we had changed so much of the code, and I was just I slept very poorly for a couple of weeks waiting to see how it all played out. And luckily, we had a good level of internal testing and we caught most everything. I think it was fine. But I've definitely been on that side before. And as an engineer, what you always do is you cross your fingers and go, just hope it wasn't me, right? And that particular time that I mentioned before, I actually didn't think it was me. I thought it was, oh, that's a login. No, that's not me. It couldn't have been me. Turned out it was me because of this code that I thought was just when you launched an icon or something, also got called on the first login and I didn't know. And as long as everything was quick, it was fine. But if your network was bad and that response took too long, you had problems. It's so fascinating. I actually do kind of miss writing code. Put the links back up. I kind of miss writing code, to be honest, because it is really fun building something, but it is also stressful, especially as more people use what you make. But yeah, are there any questions or anything you guys have? I'm just curious. MWD says this wasn't a cloud problem. The Falcon platform, cybersecurity platform, is a cloud platform, but it was basically a software update that was rolled out to these computers. So then after that, it wasn't a cloud problem; it was local. But the the it was a cloud responsible for distributing this code and updating the computers and stuff. Yeah, we've been we've been through we've been through the ringer quite a bit. We've we've had issues like this. I mean, you guys have heard of outages. I remember recently, I think it was like a web service like Amazon being down and causing a rippling effect. But Windows probably is one of the biggest. I would imagine Electrify America or like other charging stations, if you have an EV, were probably affected. I didn't hear from anybody on that front. Just not as prolific right now as the millions of people traveling and all the other things that people do. But Windows is kind of everywhere. And I've always kind of thought maybe it shouldn't be. Like, I think, you know, it's probably not the best. It's a good kind of simple, it's a good all around decision, but I think there's probably better, more curated security related top operating systems that some people should be running. Like I know BlackBerry has this thing called QNX that they're running automobiles and stuff. It's like a dedicated platform just for this, right? And dedicated stuff is probably better than the general solution, which is what Windows is, and it always will have to tailor to both of those camps. But so Alex says, "What happened? I just got here." There was a massive issue with a company called CrowdStrike, who deployed a software update to their enterprise customers around cybersecurity that had a problem in it. And so all these Windows machines were down. So if you try to get a coffee or go to a merchant, try to fly on a plane, some voice over IP internet services have all been down. And they're fixing it, but it could potentially take a little bit of time. But yeah, it's not a bad actor. It was just a mistake, and hopefully we sort it out. Yeah. Hopefully you guys are having a good day and a good week, and I hope you have a good weekend. I think my wife is on the chat. Claudia, does that answer all your questions? Like I was walking in here and she was asking me a couple questions. I was like,